Lesson 2, Economics, Form 2. Here we are considering the words we use in the description or the definition of economics. Production, distribution, and consumption of commodities. So on this cover page, this is a production unit. They produce biscuits. After this production, the producer will not keep the biscuits inside. He's going to either display them in the bakery shop, or he'll parcel them beautifully and send them out to other shops. That's distribution. And it is only through that the consumers will have access to it and consume. So we are looking at these three keywords. Let's start with production. Production is the process of transforming material or activity into a useful form as required by consumers. So it's the process of transforming material or activity into a useful form as required by consumers. So production therefore involves a process and an end result or a product. That product is known as a commodity. So that is what takes place. So, and we can look at it deeply. If we take wheat, we use it to make bread or the biscuits that we saw on the back of the page. So we transform wheat, which is considered as the material, into flour, which is the finished product. So the material gives the finished product. The flour, if we transform wheat into flour, it means that the raw material is wheat, the finished product is flour. Now, we can still take the flour and consider it as material and transform it into bread or biscuits. So the bread or the biscuits will become the finished product of the commodity now, and the flour will be the raw material. We can transform sugarcane into sugar. Now, if we take leather, we can transform leather into shoes. We can transform cotton into cloth. So in the production of goods, we have the base material, which through processing is transformed into a good. So we can say materials that are used in the production process could be quite raw. That is, at times, like if we talk about primary goods or primary products, they come kind of raw, like sand, like palm nuts, like palm kernels, hides, wheat. So these are primary products extracted from natural resources. Now, these could be materials that we use for production, but it is not always the case. We could still use processed materials in the production process, like flour, which is already processed, cement, which is already processed, palm oil, which is already processed, palm kernel oil, or leather. So we look at this processing. When we talk about processing, it is just changing or improving the form of the material. So it ends up in a commodity. It ends up in a commodity which we consume. So we can look at these biscuits now. These biscuits are produced using flour, which is the base material, and the flour is transformed or improved into biscuits. As we have explained, after this production, it does not mean that the economic production is true, or that the economic definition is complete, because we have transformed a raw material into a finished product. No, it is not complete. We have to go to the next stage. So, as we're saying, in production, we don't only end with a service. We don't only end, with a good. We could end by producing a service. So a service is a valuable action, deed, or effort performed to satisfy a need or to fulfill a demand. So this is a valuable action, deed, or effort performed to satisfy a need or fulfill a demand. We have, for example, catering, driving, a barber, a teacher, or a hairdresser. These are all service providers. Because if we look into it, a barber does not transform any material into anything. A hairdresser does not transform material into a good, or a teacher or a driver. All they do is that they carry out a service. Now, if we look at this taxi, the driver does not produce anything palpable or a good. He does not produce a good. What he does is he renders a service. He takes passengers from one point and drops them at the next point. So it is a transportation service. Now, in the background here, we can see a lady riding a motorcycle cart. So the cart behind she uses for transportation of goods. She uses for transportation of goods. So she uses that to render a service. She uses that to render a service. Now, if we look at distribution, as we were already saying, that when we look at production, it means that we have not come to the end of our definition of economics. Because what has the end product or the commodity or the final product has to be consumed. And it cannot be consumed if it is not made available to the consumer. So there we have distribution. So we have seen the link between production and consumption. But for consumption to be effective, the good or service must be made available to the consumer. You cannot have a haircut if you do not know where to find a barber. So you can understand that. So the barber has to be such that it's available to you. If Guinness Cameroon produced and bottled the drinks and simply stored them in their warehouse, the consumer in Kumba will have no access to it. So you see, now if textbooks were not brought to bookshops, you will not be able to buy. So if I produce textbooks, keep them in my house, they will not be consumed. So the best place for me is to take them to bookshops, and a bookshop is the best place to make the textbooks available to the consumer. So we now see the importance of distribution. Distribution involves taking the product or the service to where it can be consumed. That could be a physical movement, transferring the product or the service to where it can be consumed. Say, for example, you produce potatoes in Santa. You want the products to be consumed. So the next thing is you transfer them, pack them in bags and take them to the Bamenda market. That is where people come to buy. So that is the first thing about distribution. The next thing is making the product known to the consumers. Now, to make the product known to the consumers, it means that you could, for example, there are people who go to Santa to buy potatoes. If they know that you have potatoes, they will come right to your doorsteps and buy. They may pay a little less than if you took them to the market, but you would have made it available to them by making them understand that you have potatoes. And the third thing is convincing the consumers to want the product. As we explained, producers produce what they know will be consumed. If they are producing a new product, they know that they can convince consumers through persuasive adverts to acquire the good to consume. So this aspect is important. It is another way of making their commodity accessible to the consumer. So you can see here we have talked about transportation, information, and marketing. That is what is involved in distribution. Physically taking the goods to where they can be consumed, informing about the goods, and then marketing it. That is using all the different forms of marketing to convince people to buy it. So you see, this is physical transportation of goods. This motorcycle takes the goods to the consumers. That's a form of distribution. It's already this lady is actually distributing. Now let's look at the next picture. The next picture is showing us a shop. It's a shop. The first thing is that it is well located. It is very accessible. So buyers can always come there in their numbers and buy whatever commodities are inside. The next aspect is that it is well advertised. It has written up here that it is boulangerie, something that is in English, it means bakery. And we know that in bakeries today, apart from bread and other pastries, there are lots of other shop items that you can buy. So this man now is satisfied that he has advertised, he has brought his goods to the consumers, because he is dragging consumers to come in and buy. So you can understand that process of distribution which we have been talking about. Now, as we said now, the distribution is the link between the producer and the consumer, and consumption. So the consumer consumes because the producer has made whatever he has produced available to him. So if we come to consumption, we remind ourselves about the science of economics, which involves production, distribution, and consumption of commodities. So we will remind ourselves that we produce only goods and services that are useful. This means they can satisfy a want. And consumption simply means you are satisfying a want, because you will not consume something that you don't like, or which is not giving you any form of satisfaction. You simply reject that thing. Consumption is not effective if it is not satisfying a want. So you've seen, if it is not satisfying a want, it is not effective at all. So we can give you examples. We drink water because it satisfies taste, which is a want. And then we need to look at this other aspect. If a thirsty man is longing for beer, longing very much for beer, and you give him but water, he will reject it because it will not satisfy his thirst for beer. It will not satisfy his want. So at that particular moment, his want is beer. So you see how that consumption is strictly tied to you consume only what you want. So you take clothes, for example. We wear them because we need them to cover our nakedness. So our want is to cover our nakedness. But there are other people who want clothes because of fashion. So you give them sackcloth or some kind of ordinary cloth, they will reject it, because their want is fashion. They want to be in fashion. That is the only thing that will give them satisfaction. So the process of consumption makes it possible for the producer to continue producing. So the producer bases his production on what the consumer wants. If the producer decides to come out with a new product, he must be capable of convincing the consumer to want that new product. You understand? He must be able to convince the consumer to want that new product. So read Economics, the Beginner's Companion.